So today we're going to talk about looking good, like putting your best virtual foot forward. It's been kind of called to our attention that, there are some mistakes out there and there's some people that make it look good. And, maybe we need to get used to this platform. So we're going to try to look as good as we can. And Bryan Dowell, the director of Studio46 Media, is going to lead us through this today. And they have some great tips on, obviously, as good as his background and everything looks so professional, and they're going to give us some tips and tricks on how to take advantage of that and help your professional presence if we must do virtual. So we're going to turn it over to Bryan, and if you have any questions, put them in the chat and he'll kind of walk you through that, and we'll get started.
Sounds great. Thanks, Liz, and the team at Commerce Lexington. Thanks for the opportunity to share with this 330 group about putting your best virtual foot forward. Other video conferencing services have taken over our daily lives as we know it, including meetings, job interviews, heck, even dinner parties. You might be wondering how to act and look your best during these calls, especially if you're new to video conferencing thanks to the coronavirus, but at this point, we're probably all seasoned veterans. You'll know just how jarring the whole experience can be versus in-person meetings. And video etiquette can differ quite a lot to that in a real-life meeting. Practicing good video meeting etiquette is critical to ensuring that your meetings are professional, efficient, and valuable. And importantly, that you come across well to your colleagues, your customers, your friends, or, well, heck, whoever you're speaking to. Understanding the importance of meeting etiquette is essential to mastering your online presence. We're going to cover a few things from proper lighting to your background, dressing the part and dressing the set, and when to use virtual backgrounds. Perspective and sight lines and eye contact. Sound, we're going to cover your microphone, speakers, headsets, and just the space or environment you're in. Your camera. Now, after we have those components mastered, we need to understand the role and proper etiquette of a meeting host, understanding the platform and the functionality that's available to you, and how to engage your audience in a virtual environment. Wow, that's going to be a lot of things for us to cover, but it's really not anything new to us. Most have been doing this for the past year, and back to WebEx and other things over the years, we've been doing it for quite some time. That said, as we kick off 2021, the grace that's been extended to us in adapting to this virtual and hybrid world is, it's going, gone. We need to have another level of professionalism in putting our best foot forward. For example, if I were to have started my presentation today like this.
Bryan, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute. It's one of those things that it just starts, and you can be flustered and you won't be able to start where you're at in your content that you're delivering. So again, perfect example. I got flustered and we didn't figure out where we're at. So anyways, your immediate impression of me, if that was the case, and my organization is immediately decreased. So that was a great example. You may be flustered and not able to recover during the balance of your time. So now that we're recovered, we'll show that we'll start off right from the beginning. As we get going, I want us to be engaged and not a one-way presentation for the next 45 minutes. So let's utilize some of the tools that are in front of us, the chat for some conversation. I've got folks from our team that are in there and can answer some questions, or we'll just be able to talk about them at the end. And we can cover these during a time of Q&A. So if you're anything like me, you'll be distracted, and sometimes you may just go, hey, I need to figure out what it was I wanted to say. So just throw it in the chat as a reminder for you and for us of what we want to cover. So Zoom is a video conferencing tool, and this conversation, much like other online meeting software, includes Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, and many more programs. So let's talk about proper lighting. Getting lighting right for all of your presentation considerations for video, lighting is arguably the most important. Where Zoom video meetings are concerned, in general, the more light, the better. And since that you've made an effort to actually get dressed for the meeting, you want your attendees to be able to see you properly. For example, some of these photos. Front-facing natural light from a nearby window is probably the most ideal. It even accentuates or brightens your skin features, giving you a clear, flattering, and presentable image on video. Maybe a little unlike myself. Placing the light source behind you to backlight you makes it harder for you to see and casts unflattering shadows on your face, or even turns you into a spooky silhouette. If you have a window behind you, be sure to shut the blinds. Light coming from behind you could also have a harsh effect on everyone else's screens, and you don't want to start off a meeting by immediately hurting everyone's eyes. It's definitely not a great impression. Dressing the part. It might feel a little strange and unnecessary to dress professionally when you're working out of your home and chasing children in between meetings, but you'll be surprised at the difference it makes to the way you act, switching from lounging around into work mode. It can easily give you the temptation to wear, you can easily give into the temptation to wear sweatpants or an old t-shirt for a call, but if your colleagues and customers expect you to have a professional appearance, you should. Dress for the video conference the way that you would if it was going to be an in-person meeting. As for what specifically to wear, steer towards solid colors or large and bold patterns, and avoid sleeveless tops. And things that hang off your shoulder, it has a contrast in light. Your backgrounds, dressing the set, and when to use virtual backgrounds. Although our homes are inherently less equipped for professional meetings than an office setting, there are better spots to take a call than others. Think about when you are trying to sell or buy a home. Often realtors will stage the house for presentation. Similarly, stage your video area to limit distractions. When you dial into a Zoom call, naturally, people won't just be looking at you. They'll be looking to see what's around you, what's directly behind you. So before the meeting starts, check that your camera isn't pointed to the side of anything that will draw attention. A pile of dirty laundry, or heck, even an unmade bed maybe. A few items to be mindful when preparing you for your virtual calls. Neutral versus empty. True, less is more when it comes to video conferencing, but positioning yourself in front of a completely bare white wall is not the neutral background that you'd want to seek out. Grab a plant or a photo frame to hang on the wall. Clutter. More piles of clutter around, reduce the figurines and collectibles you may have, or other things that are just around. As my uncle would say, those put-arounds, they distract you a little bit. So maybe consider utilizing the Marie Kondo method of decluttering the shelves behind you. Now be sure to be modest. Don't be one of those people who uses Zoom or your video conference as a way to show off your vast library of business mastermind books or a room full of the finest bourbons, although I really love bourbon. Stick to a simplistic background wherever possible. Additionally, you should also try to attend a meeting from a quiet area that has minimal background noise and movement. If you're in the room with the door, close it. Consider putting a meeting in progress note on the door and tell other members of your household to please not interrupt unless it's an emergency. I know a lot of us are battling kids, and that can be very challenging. I'm sure most of you have seen the BBC News video clip where the child interrupts her father live during a news interview. We'll drop that into the chat if you haven't seen it, but it's a great example of those kind of interruptions. If you can't alter the physical environment itself, you can still hide the appearance of your space through a virtual background feature. Zoom and other programs allow you to add a fun virtual background to the video instead of just showing the contents of a messy room or wherever you're at in your home, business, or elsewhere. You can even upload your own photo or create a virtual background highlighting your company logo or brand, as I see several of you have. Perspective, sight lines, and eye contact. Angle and position your camera correctly to give the appearance that you're speaking at eye level to participants rather than at giant gazing ominously down upon them. And if you don't want to show off a double chin or the contents of your nostrils, drop your laptop or mobile device, or bring your mobile device up so that it's at eye level. As for distance, try to position yourself so that the camera is seeing you from the chest or waist up, instead of your face taking up the whole frame. Seeing more of you is more natural for the viewer, similar to that of a face-to-face meeting. Don't forget to look directly into the camera. When in a virtual meeting, it's very easy to look off and look to your other screen and not see the people and be making eye contact. So the window's populated like this. When I'm seeing a bunch of windows over here, I can be staring at it. And if I look at you directly into the camera, this will mimic the eye contact that you would really want. If you look at an image of yourself on the screen, again, you'll appear to be looking off to the side. It's important to gauge reactions by looking at other participants on the screen or alternating with that by looking into the camera and back and forth. It makes you feel like attendees or that you're really talking to the different attendees. Since most built-in cameras on laptops are located at the top, try to aim your glaze to the top third of your screen for consistency, sometimes even shrinking the screen up. Zoom gives you the option to use either a speaker or gallery view. Choosing the gallery of view allows you to see the members of your meeting at one time, which is preferable because it lets you see everyone's reactions to what's being said. To talk about your microphones, speakers, headsets, and your environment or space, we've all been on Zoom calls or other meetings where the person sounds too far distant, too soft, too loud, a little scratchy. Coming from a production background, we could quickly overcomplicate this, but let's just keep it simple. You need a good microphone. Whether it's built into your nicer looking web camera, it's standalone, or it's part of a headset, you'll want to make sure it's close to you and that it's actually in line with you in the direction of your camera. Now, we've talked about dressing the part, the importance of proper lighting, staging your space, maintaining your sight lines and eye contact. These would all be for nothing if you were blurry and people couldn't see you. Built-in cameras versus external cameras. Newer laptops have decent cameras built into them, as well as your mobile phones and tablets. That said, they can be slightly limiting as they're fixed to your screen and the angle that you may be adjusting it. If your setup allows for an external camera, opt for one of those. Now that you have the camera figured out, let's chat about some of the basics. Start with using a microfiber cloth and wiping off your camera before a meeting. No one needs to see those greasy handprints from lunch. Make sure that your camera is level with the horizon and not skewed one way or other, as if you had a little too much bourbon to drink. Keep it stationary. If you're using a laptop, don't actually have it sitting on your lap on the couch or a recliner chair where it's continually moving back and forth. Once you have those components mastered, we need to understand the following items. The role and proper etiquette of the meeting host. And for attendees, show up on time. Video meetings make it obvious when colleagues show up late, wasting the time of those who log in promptly. Getting yourself onto a call and on time and feeling relaxed is a very important step and is easier said than done sometimes, even if a meeting is just a click away. Set a reminder for that meeting and get prepared well in advance. Know your talking points, write out an agenda, and set yourself an objective for the meeting. It's far too easy to take for granted that the meeting is right in front of us and not necessarily down the hall, down the street, or heck, across the world. My grandmother always said, to be early is on time. To be on time is to be late, and to be late is dead. I think other people have said that much the same. Learn to manage participants effectively. These tools that we're using have lots of ways a host can manage participants during a call, by muting attendees or telling them that their mic is accidentally switched off, sending files, managing chat options, screen sharing, etc. Familiarize yourself with what's available to you and how the functions work before the meeting, so that you're not left fumbling around when the time comes to use them during your call. So you've finally joined into the call. Now it's not the time to let your etiquette standards slip. Let's rise to the occasion with these essential pointers. Don't be a lurker. Lurking is a common breach of virtual meeting etiquette. The act of sitting in a meeting with your video mysteriously turned off. Of course, there may be good reasons for that. For instance, sometimes in a keynote presentation, but some of the videos are turned off. Maybe it's poor connection, it's sudden interruptions, or maybe you all just agree to stick to audio. But to lurk in the background when everyone else is visible can come across as quite bad manners. What's more, showing your face can improve your business prospects and boost your personal brand. Did you know that more than 80% of business professionals believe face-to-face meetings are better in building trust and strong relationships? When you have your video switched on, people will see you as a real person and not just a voice on a conference call. When starting meetings, especially small meetings, introduce everyone individually. When it comes to Zoom, there's no concept of mingling or floating between groups to introduce yourself. The moment someone clicks join a meeting, they'll abruptly be thrust in front of potentially dozens or hundreds of faces staring at them, many of them they might not know. Be sure to introduce everyone individually and create a welcoming environment to stimulate engagement. As each person pops in, name them, say hello, and begin the necessary introductions. You can also consider using a waiting room. It's definitely a feature that we'd recommend, that everyone enters the meeting at the same time. This will allow everyone to come in and not miss an important welcome message or introduction. Pause deliberately to encourage free-flowing conversation. Due to the nature of video conferencing versus real life meetings, virtual calls really work best when people talk one at a time. It's only the way that everyone can listen clearly to what's being said. If you find yourself in a politeness contest with someone who's speaking at the same time, just, no, you go ahead. Or use the raise hand function to talk one at a time. You can then add your ideas to the chat so your train of thought is not lost. Sometimes, I'm one of those that get distracted in meetings, so I utilize the chat function often so I don't forget what I wanted to talk about. Stay on mute if you're not talking. One of my personal pet peeves is any kind of background noise that can be really distracting during a meeting. Now, sometimes it happens, but screaming kids, dogs barking, or something as simple as doors and cupboards shutting and opening during the meeting. So if you aren't talking, hit mute. Silence any unnecessary audio coming from your end to potential feedback. Don't multitask. Stay focused on the meeting. Since you're not in the same room as many of the attendees, you might be tempted to work on other tasks during a video meeting. Taking notes on the content being discussed during a meeting is fine, but other activities such as checking your email should be kept to a minimum or avoided. Sit still. We've all seen those people that pace back and forth. Colleagues stop listening because they're watching you, easily distracted. If you need to change location, don't just grab the laptop and go, making everyone feel like they're now on a wild amusement park ride. Turn off the video momentarily so that you don't make them dizzy and move to your new location. I know it's tempting so often to eat during meetings, but don't eat. Especially don't eat chips and some things that's crunchy like that. As Zoom becomes a way of life, more and more attendees are using high-fidelity headsets with amplified sounds of chewing. Sorry, there goes the little audio engineering side of us. If you're going to eat, do us all a favor and at least mute yourself. Show others that you're listening. Yes, virtual calls sometimes can be boring and often yearn for the days of telephone-only voice meetings where people couldn't see what you're up to or where you're at throughout them. But since you're on camera, you want to at least look like you're paying attention. Show some support for your colleagues through nonverbal cues that you are paying attention to them. Nod, shake your head, smile, give them a thumbs up. Even if they can't hear you, they'll be able to read your body language and appreciate your responsiveness. Use the chat function to ask questions. The likelihood of the meeting attendees, you or others, will want to ask questions during the call. But unlike in a real meeting, it can be very tricky to find the right moment to interject without coming across as rude and disrupting the flow of the conversation. Instead, have all attendees agree to use the chat function to be less intrusive, and pose their questions there. This way, you and your colleagues can submit all the questions you want during the meeting without audibly interrupting anyone who is speaking. And then, during the natural lull in the conversation, the host can answer those questions at their convenience. Alternately, the raise a hand feature is used to let it be known that you have something to say, or a Q&A session can be held at the end of a call. It's important for the moderator or leader of a meeting to be clear what that protocol is going to be before the meeting starts to ensure everyone knows what to do. Ask permission before you screenshot or record. Asking your host before taking a screenshot is the courteous thing to do. If permission is granted, you must also advise them where you plan to post that screenshot. Exit the meeting politely. The host should leave last. Taking your time to leave a meeting, avoid being abrupt. Just don't say I'm off, bye, click, end meeting. Take a minute, say, hey, Nathan, Joanna, it's been great talking to you this afternoon. Robert, it's really great to have met with you. I hope we can chat again soon. Give a friendly wave and a goodbye. That way you leave other attendees feeling recognized, but it makes you look a bit more distinguished as well. The host of the meeting is the person who decides when it eventually terminates. So to ensure that no one misses any last-minute information or last-minute conversations that might be shared separately later on, so that attendees don't feel abruptly cut off, hang around until the end to make sure everyone is happy. Close the call after every other participant has left. It's just good manners. Above all, relax, especially if you and your team are working from home. If your Zoom meeting gets interrupted by your kids, a parcel delivery, whatever it may be, better still, just laugh it off. Accept that it will happen and just roll with it. And if everyone will do the same and relax, everyone will enjoy the video meeting a little bit more, or at least make them a little bit more tolerable. You are likely going to have a go-to platform like Zoom that you may have that you're going to use, But as you meet with other individuals from other organizations or hanging out virtually with family and friends, it's critical to understand each of the other platforms that you may use, whether it's Zoom, Google Hangouts or Meet, Microsoft Teams, Skype, WebEx, and several others. If you've never used a platform, consider doing some research beforehand and maybe even a test call. How to engage your virtual audience. Watching television is very much like what you've had right now, and it's a very passive experience, which means that we have thousands of hours of muscle memory of passivity that kicks in whenever there's a screen in front of us. It doesn't matter logically that we know we're in a meeting that's live with people. It's hard for us to overcome what we've been hardwired through practice to do. While awareness of this phenomenon helps, a quick fix is to actually use a standing desk. Standing is an active posture, and more importantly, it's a physical interruption of the muscle memory from sitting on a couch, just passively consuming media. It also disrupts the muscle memory of those hours of conference calls where you're multitasking without being seen. All of this to say, being bad on Zoom calls isn't always necessarily your fault, but if you don't get good at it, others will pass you by. It's time to get organized by design. Build a positive and engaging attendee experience. If you're planning a virtual event on a much larger scale than just a few people, think about the attendee experiences that you would have created before, during, and after an in-person event or meeting. When going online, be creative and thoughtful in bringing some of those elements to a live event in your online space. What would you have received? What would they have received? Attendees would have received if it was an in-person event. Send it to them in the mail or a delivery service. Send them a gift bag, include some branded swag, some gourmet snacks, a personalized keepsake. Consider letting partners and sponsors include some giveaways too. To go against the other part that I said about no eating, lunch sometimes can be on us and not eating during meetings. But if it's a lunch and learn type of meeting, feel free to send some food delivery gift cards and have a virtual lunch all together. In conclusion, make sure you utilize the tools with the platform that you have to fully engage your audience. The possibilities within a virtual meeting are expanding each and every day. Do your research before having the meeting or virtual event and see what tools would work well with your audience. As always, follow-up is key to anything in building relationships and in business. Make sure that you're doing research each and every time. There is no exception just because the meeting was done virtually. And with that, Liz, I feel like I just ran through a bunch of stuff. I apologize for that, but I'm not sure if we have some comments or questions to talk about, but see several familiar faces on here. One of the
Put a question in the chat or turn your video off or unmute and ask a question, then please do it.
I'll ask a question. When sharing screens, do you have any tips for that? And sharing videos, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely, Amy. Great question. With sharing videos and sharing presentations, I think the key to that is to already have them open if you can, or you have the ability to have multiple screens. That's ideal, so you can actually have your presentation or video on another screen, so your people aren't distracted by the numerous icons you may have on your screen. But also utilizing the option in sharing your screen to only share the specific program that you want to share, not necessarily the entire screen. I just want to show PowerPoint, or I just want to show this video on the internet browser. That keeps it limited to the only things that you want to actually share with them during that time. Biggest thing with any of those things, whether it's presentations, but especially in video, is I would test it beforehand. Practice makes perfect, and beyond just yourself delivering that message is to try that with another person. Even if they're just in the other room, just make sure the audio is going to come through clearly for them. It's going to load how you want to. In addition to that, if you're playing video, you're going to want to make sure that you're on a good internet connection, and preferably hardwired. I know that more and more that's becomes challenging to do, but that's definitely a recommendation, is to be hardwired if you're going to share videos. So thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. Great job, by the way. Thank you so much, Steve, for this information. It's very valuable. I'm just curious, what do you do, or some suggestions for individuals? Oftentimes you get on a call and some people don't want to be on video. So you're on video, they're not on video, or maybe throughout that call, there's audio issues or video issues. Do you have any tools, tips, or tricks for somebody who can't really get it to work? Let's say you set up a call and they can't figure it out, and I've had to, text message and circumvent that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the thing, is knowing your audience. I think would be the first piece there, especially if it's an internal meeting. I think you're gonna have a better chance to know your audience. But as you're working with clients or other potential folks, I mean, I had a couple sales presentations today. One or two of them were definitely tech savvy. The latter one was not so much, but it just felt like more of a technology support type conversation. And it took a little longer to get to the actual sales part of our conversation. So making sure you know where they're at skill wise is important going into the meetings, and or just if they're going to struggle, to say, hey, would you connect a few minutes early? We're going to go ahead and have this meeting start 10, 15 minutes early. I mean, especially if you're going to be the host, I mean, that extending that olive branch to them is definitely a helpful thing. And also it just has you better and more equipped and prepared for the conversation, is to give them a chance to not feel flustered going into the thing as their trouble. I mean, it ends up being a distraction for you as the host, but also a distraction for the other attendees. So I'd say starting early is better than anything else. Thanks, Steve.
I have a question. As we're kind of thinking about getting out of this COVID world and back into in-person events, there's going to be a lot of people that are not comfortable coming back out to in-person. So a mix of like a Zoom hybrid, a Zoom and an in-person meeting might make the most sense as we ease back into the world whenever that time comes. Is that something that you would suggest, or is that more of like a live event kind of thing where you have people there and you have people Zoom? How do you think that would best work?
Yeah, great question, Crystal. I mean, it's definitely yes is the answer there. I mean, these hybrid events are what we're going to see coming back out of this pandemic. It's what we've already started to see now. We've helped quite a few folks do just that. And you want to make sure that the experience is great for both those that are virtual and those that are in person. We've hosted several meetings here in our facility with folks that are in the room, but also bringing in folks virtually as well. Sometimes it may be that your keynote speaker is going to be coming in that way. So it needs to be a primary thought and not an afterthought. So it needs to be something you've planned for and as you prepare for your meeting, and not just oh, by the way, we're now going to have some people that connect in virtually. It needs to be planned from the get-go as you go. And it's definitely gonna be the way that we're going to see this year go as the vaccine gets distributed and groups and meetings start to take place again. You're going to find this hybrid. It's going to be it's going to be here to stay. I really don't think it's even just going to be this year or next year. I think it's going to be here for the foreseeable future, which is, it's honestly going to change the way meetings are conducted and taking place, and require more and more technology. But I think with that, as a shameless plug, is I'd find a professional to help you. It's nice that I can talk to you, but I have a team of people that are making sure that everything else is working, so that you can focus on what's important to you, is talking, delivering content and meetings, and focusing on the people and making it the most engaging and exciting experience possible for your attendees and meeting participants. Thanks, Crystal. Any other thoughts or questions?
I have another question in the technology space. So there's obviously there's Zoom calls, there's projects, there's Google Hangouts, there's Windstream has their own which one have you found to be the most user-friendly, or which one do you typically see that's utilized the most?
Yeah, I'd say hands down, Zoom seems to be the primary go-to. It has the most brand recognition and the most familiarity with attendees. Organization-wise, internally, we utilize Microsoft Teams quite a bit for our company internally, but most all external-facing meetings, we utilize Zoom for those, because it just seems to have the largest market share, and just has even the additional functionality it has with being able to do breakout rooms and just other things to help make meetings as engaging as possible. Some of the other systems are a little bit more limiting on that.
And in terms of the breakout rooms, I find that they're very valuable. Do you typically tell people how to do that, or like sometimes people don't know how to do that, or could you tell us? Maybe some people know how to do them or don't know how to do them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great, Steve. Yeah, I definitely find them beneficial, especially, I mean, again, it's kind of designing your meeting and the experience that you want. But if engagement and one-on-one conversation is something you want to have, breaking up into smaller groups, whether you have some pre-assigned meeting rooms that people can drop into, or you can go and have that meeting space and just distribute your participants into multiple rooms automatically based on 2 or 3 people or a dozen people or whatever it is definitely important. Depending on the Zoom that you're using, it would just be an option. It has pretty much a spot for breakout rooms, and you're able to then take the participants and drop them into breakout rooms. Not all versions of Zoom actually have that fully available to you in the functionality, but being sure that you have the right product to allow you to do that's important. And again, I'm always a big fan of practice. Definitely try it and be familiar with it before you actually need to use it. Just find a safe group of people to practice it with.
Looks like Susan Loncho from Kentucky American Water has a good question in the chat.
Where should one put scripts so they don't have to look down? Yeah, that's a great question. I like looking at it directly in front of me. So utilizing a teleprompter of some sort is the best. There's all kinds of different types of teleprompters that are out there, but the biggest one is distance and sight lines. The closer it is to you, if I have a script right in front of me, it's going to be too small. Now, if my camera is just a little further away from me, I may be able to set an iPad right under it, or I may be able to make it a little bit larger and be able to read it if it's printed. But just in front of me, but as close to the screen as possible, or to the camera as possible, ideally through it by utilizing a teleprompter where you're able to read the script while still looking directly at the camera. That's a great question.
Yeah, and thank you. I just put my video on so you can see me, but I just got that question today from an executive that was going to be doing the presentation, and it's particularly challenging if it's a situation where they're going to be sharing their screen at different points in the presentation, that sort of thing. So that's why I was thinking, what kinds of tips and tricks are out there? So thank you.
Very much, Susan. We've worked with a couple of political candidates, or not political candidates, but a couple of political folks, an ambassador, and they needed to have several different presentations that they needed to deliver, and they had multiple things going on, from presentations to scripts to Q&A. So being able to have that in front of you and be able to have that person focus on doing the part they need to do, and surrounding yourself with some other folks that can help manage some of the other parts and pieces. And that could be as simple as just having somebody from your office have the laptop and the screen in front of them and just turning around a web camera on top, facing it to the person that's talking. And you have somebody else sitting there with you, just running the Zoom, muting and unmuting and pinning people and interacting with folks. It's just helpful to have some help when you need it. But we get those kind of questions all the time, Susan.
How did you do the thing where you're not screen sharing, but you had another like photos overlay on yourself?
Yeah, so as I say, we're able to, depending on what you want to do, sometimes in line of presentations, especially in larger meetings, we put a video switcher in place between the camera and a computer. Then it connects into the computer as a webcam for Zoom. So we just have a little bit of additional hardware in place. And some folks manning each of those parts. So again, the presenter can speak, and then they can call up different images or slides or presentation components as they want on the fly. Absolutely, that's great. Well, I'm not sure if there's other questions. One of the things I've always liked to do is in trying to be engaging is try to understand what a key takeaway is. And I'm not sure if it's not a question, maybe what's a key takeaway that you may have from today's conversation, or if we didn't even cover it, just another key takeaway from being able to put your best virtual foot forward. Just love to be able to share that so we can all walk away with at least some nugget and understand what maybe other people took away from it. Practice ahead of time, absolutely. Practice makes perfect. Well, practice makes better than not.
I'll share one. One of my mentors at another company mentioned to always do my homework prior to the call, to go to LinkedIn, obviously learn a little bit more about people so that you can foster this sense of community prior to the call where you can really build that camaraderie. but he suggested actually coming from the bottom of the individual's LinkedIn page and working your way to the top. So then you can learn a lot more about the causes, campaigns, and things that are near and dear to people's hearts, and really get a connection so that they're open and willing to listen.
Absolutely. That's a great one, Steve. Yeah, definitely knowing your audience. I mean, I said that a couple of times, and definitely that's a great way to understand and know who your audience is understand them, understand their background, because you're not afforded the opportunity to do that mix and mingle at the beginning of an event necessarily, to be able to learn more and more about Don's background or Steve's background or Mark's background or anybody else. You're jumping in feet first, and it'd be good to know those folks' backgrounds. Absolutely, that's great. It looks like some other folks in the chat keeping you on camera to be more engaging with the audience. Virtual doesn't mean good manners are optional. Amen. Definitely multitasking during Zoom meetings. It's far too easy for us. We don't have a lot of margin built into our calendars anyways. So any extra opportunities that we can grab a phone or look on our computer to check email is definitely one of those things that jump into the front of our mind. Don't show off your background of bourbon or trinkets. Absolutely. I love my bourbon, but I don't need everybody to see it. Not having the window behind you. That's a common piece, because I mean, a lot of times folks are in their homes, and it's just one of those things that happens. So at least being able to be mindful of trying to close the blinds or just readjust yourselves. We've helped some pharmaceutical folks and some professional doctors in various offices that they're stuck in their hospitals, especially right at the onset of COVID. We were doing meetings with folks, and there's not a lot of great options inside of their offices. So trying to be smart about how that works and how to help them. And again, like we talked about earlier, is just coming on a little early to the conversation to allow them, especially if they're going to be a speaker or one of your panelists talking, give them opportunity to look the best that they can by coming on a little early. So that's great. Yeah, hardwiring is important. Love hardwiring the connection so you don't have to worry about wireless coming up and down, especially if you're at the house and you have spouses or significant others that are connecting and doing work online, or children. Definitely just that many different connections at the house definitely starts to drain some of the bandwidth. And by hardwiring in, you immediately have priority over that. So any other thoughts? I know I may have missed one or two of them in there. Or other questions? I know I see Mark Mahan on here, and there's definitely quite a few professionals that do this kind of stuff. So definitely seek out folks that can help you put your best virtual foot forward. It's important to look the best and to be the best. And if you're doing anything much more than an internal meeting or small external sales meetings, it's definitely good to have some help. And there's quite a few folks around this market that can help you out. Are there any other questions or thoughts?
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you so much, Bryan and Studio 46. We really appreciate you all coming on and helping us look better and strive to look more professional. We really appreciate that. And keep apprised of upcoming Commerce Lexington events. We're trying to populate our calendar as fast as they get planned. So commercelexington.com, check out the calendar and the Facebook group if you haven't. It's a great way to share your information and help each other out. And we'll see you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Liz, and thanks everybody for your time.